events on the continent. And Amanda Akol Amazima sitting in for Jagenda Semakula. Today we look at coups and political unrest on the continent, and basically we shall be looking at the happenings in Sudan, Guinea, Bissau, and also in Eswatini, that is in Southern Africa. Now with me in studio is Ndugu Mtuta James, of course. Jagenda Semakula, Jagenda Semakula will be joining us later in the program, but also we shall be having Christopher Luanga from Uganda People's Congress joining us on Zoom. Ndugu Mtuta, karibu sana.
Asante ndugu.
Yes, how has the week been?
This week has been okay, has been hectic and scary, as you may have known. Of the events that unfolded in Kampala. But in all, I think it has been good, and so far so good.
Well, thank you, Ndugu Mtuta James. Now, straight to actually the topic, we look at what is happening in Sudan. Of course, coup after coup. We also see what is happening in Guinea Bissau, that formerly Portuguese Guinea, because when you look with Guinea, there is French Guinea, that is Guinea Conakry, and the French Guinea, that is the Guinea Conakry, and Portuguese Guinea, that is Guinea Bissau. So what is happening to the Guineas? Because we saw a successful coup the other day in Conakry, and now an attempted coup in Bissau. What is not happening?
I think Africa, and you know, it is one of the continents that really, other than maybe next to it, it's Asia, that have suffered generally the foreign influence and the outside influence, because you wouldn't have expected to go back into the 60s and 70s when we used to have coups as a way of attaining power on the continent, and we have seen that happen, and we thought that chapter by now would be closed. And now, fortunately or unfortunately for Africans, it seemed to come back now. Either we are being haunted by our own history, or being mismanaged as a result of mismanaging our own affairs, or sometimes the stakes that maybe even as of now, there seem to be higher stakes in the management and access to resources in Africa. But I think not all that notwithstanding, there has been a big problem in terms of management of our own management. Because I was listening to one speaker yesterday was saying, we have been blaming the West, we have been blaming everyone for exploitation, for interference. But said, what have we done on our part to avoid that? Because by today, after we gain independence as African states, we would have cushioned ourselves against such. Now, unfortunately, that has not happened. So we are seeing a recurrence of what happened. For example, for Sudan, for example, I think it's the mentality, because the coups have been an in thing in this particular community, and most of these other African countries you are mentioning, the Bissaus, it has been coup after coup and coup after coup. With the Sudan, when in 1989, when there was that successful coup that brought in Bashir,
yes. and his strongman Bashir,
strongman Bashir and his group. We thought that chapter had now closed, that we wouldn't expect another coup to happen, because we would have learned from our experiences. Yesterday, when the president was talking about security issues, he did hint on late this man who was speaker,
Turabi. Yes,
and
yes.
he talked about the Turabi influence within the region. And of course, when you look at the 1989 coup, Turabi was the architect actually, and by default,
he was the kingmaker.
Yes, by default, the default brings. I mean, the process brings in Bashir. Now, much as Bashir was the president, but Turabi had a lot of influence. Turabi was an attorney general at one point. He was a minister of foreign affairs at one point. He became the secretary general of the Islamic Congress, the political party that, the outfit that was formed. Of course, later on it was split. So Turabi becomes very powerful.
And then finally the speaker.
Yes, and he becomes the speaker of the Senate. Now, at one point, they had to fall out with
Bashir.
With Bashir,
yes, yes.
For his high-handedness and the Islamic connotations in the administration. You remember, he's the one who introduced, as Attorney General, who introduced the Sharia law in Sudan, the northern Sudan. Then, because then the Sudans were both the lower Sudan, now the South Sudan, and the northern Sudan. He introduced that Sharia law in the northern Sudan. And when you look at the conflicts that happened during that time, including the bad record of the human rights, this man was behind that. And you remember, when UN imposed sanctions on Sudan, partly for the plan to assassinate President Mubarak of Egypt, and that plan that failed, and then the sanctions were imposed on Sudan. That is when, you know, the Islamic Congress, the political party that brought in the revolution of the Bashir and the Turabi, was very strong, but was very unpopular within the population. So when the sanctions were imposed, the system more or less got problems, and then there was need for survival, and that's why I think that struggle with the then president came in. And you remember, it was because of those sanctions that President Bashir, remember one time he almost brought us trouble here when the minister said, when Honorable Riam said, no, if he comes,
we shall hand him over.
We shall hand him over.
Well, you can hold it there. We are joined by Christopher Lwanga from Uganda People's Congress. Christopher, are you online?
Online, sir.
Yes, good
morning to you.
Morning to you. And yes, we are discussing coups and political unrest in Africa, beginning with Sudan. Your take on the happenings, on what is going on in Sudan?
Before you zoom towards Sudan, I need to thank you and congratulate you, and even thank the management of UPC for allowing such an opportunity to discuss such sensitive matters which are affecting Africa. I should say I'm the best candidate in the manner that my political party, my leader, my government suffered twice from military coups and from several types of political unrest. I refer to my leader as our founding military and the political party as Uganda People's Congress. What we discuss right now, and we discuss Guinea Canada, it is the tail end we are touching. This phenomenon of military coups in Africa is not new, and it came as a counter force to the great work.
Ndugu Lwanga, we see the network is not clear. We shall be getting back to you. Yes, Mtuta?
Oh.
I think he has a problem with the network where he is. Now, we were talking about the genesis of Sudan. And this man, Turabi, also forms the National Islamic Front as a fighting wing for the party. And then you remember during the Gulf War, 35 countries were aligned, the allied forces fighting against Saddam Hussein for invading Kuwait.
Kuwait, yes.
Yeah. Now, Turabi forms the then nation. He called it the Islamic Front. I think that was to be a counter force to the American allied forces. And when they lost the war in the Gulf, at the same time when this war is ending, Russia was also leaving Afghanistan. So I think Turabi also sees there a chance of consolidating his power, but also spreading the influence. And he joins with the other forces within the Arab world and forms the strong group. Now, why I was dwelling on that was that partly of, or part of the influence is what we are now seeing attacks in the region, but also his influence was key during the Arab Spring. And you remember during the Arab Spring, many people in Sudan were actually killed. You remember the attack on the demonstrators in the streets. Apparently, during that attack, the commanding officer was Fatah, the now chief of staff and the de facto head of state of Sudan. So you see there's a lot of connection between what is happening today and the underlying factors that have been existing in the Sudan. But what is also important is that what is the power play out now. I think the civilians were misguided when Omar Bashir was overthrown, because actually President Bashir from day one was looked at as a more liberal Arab, because he could easily work with the West. He could easily connect with the people in the southern part, although the issue of Darfur more or less dented his image. And I think he also either as the influence of the Turabis, or because of his own political will to survive, a lot of mistakes were made when it came to fighting in the Darfur. But I think part of what is now playing out is because of that background, that much as there was the need to have Sudan together, but there was also the question of who controls what.
Now, let's look at what is happening currently, because we find that ever since the coup against Bashir, Sudan has not been the same.
Exactly.
And it reminds us of the French philosopher, was it Voltaire, who said that you'd rather be ruled by one lion instead of being ruled by 100 rats. Because now we are seeing one group after another overthrowing themselves so much that now they are even remembering the good old days of Bashir. So what ought to be done?
But even, you know, even the Bashir hangover is not over. Some of what is happening today is because of that Bashir influence. When, in fact, I was talking to someone from Sudan, much as the internet and most the telephone connections have now been cut off, and was telling me that even this the second takeover was equally planned, because I think the leaders, those who wanted to have it the way it is, knew that if they allowed, first of all, there was an impasse, much as that coalition between the demonstrators who finally negotiated for the terms for the transition, and also the military had agreed to form a coalition government. There was a lot of suspicion amongst those who were even in the government, including, much as the prime minister was there, but I think most of the decisions that were being taken by the military. Now, I think at the time, when he feels now he's becoming a useless leader, is when now this coup comes in. So I think we need to get rid of him, and then we save the argument by the militaries that we are trying to save the country from further chaos, from further insecurity, and from further bloodshed. But the people are also saying, no, in the first place, we didn't need you. We needed to govern ourselves as per the will of the people. Now, but they said, we are the custodians of the will of the people.
You know, what is happening in Sudan is actually, because you find that the civilians feel they should govern themselves. And of course, the army, some generals feel they
saying we should help you to govern yourself.
We should help you
to govern yourself.
So that becomes the biggest bone of
But I think that is also the biggest problem of Africa. When we look at governance, I think there has been a lot of speculation and a lot of feeling of entitlement within some of the army ranks. I mean, the army is looking at the president and seeing that without them, I mean, there cannot be government here.
Yeah, but also coups are known not to bring actually about democracy and some kind of equity or equal distribution of resources. Because ideally you find that those who mastermind, who carry out the coup, either from the very president's clan, the president's tribe, or even the president's home area, just like we've seen in Guinea-Conakry. But now we've also had the foreign influence, and what is it about France? Because we've seen the hand of France in Chad. We've seen it in Guinea-Conakry, and also in Bissau, actually. You can see the hand of France there. What is it with France when it comes to coups in Africa?
But I think it's like we said from the very beginning. I think we also, as Africans, we are failing to hold ourselves together. Why should it be in the day-to-day that Africans are still paying France in terms of taxes? Why? Because I think for me, this is something that should not be discussed only by those guys in the West Africa who are still doing that, but also the African Union. Why should we still be paying France? In fact, to the contrary, that France should be paying us.
Well, we are getting back to Luanga. I believe now the line is clear. Luanga, I hope you can hear me properly now.
Oh yes, I can hear you very well.
Yes, at first the line wasn't clear and you are not audible. Yes, let's look at what is happening in I beg your pardon, in Sudan, and then so we shall also look at what is happening in Guinea-Bissau, where there was also an attempted coup.
Permit me, first of all, to thank you and appreciate Uganda Broadcasting for such an opportunity to contribute to such a debate, where I represent the best background, having been twice a victim of the military coup in 1971 and in 1985, and a series of political unrests. I feel it is very unfortunate that such occurrences have happened on the continent, but at the same time, it can give us hope for the better future. So I thank the management of UBC and even the government for saying, have such a type of a debate, because it is the debate which is going to shape Africa. It is the debate which is going to create a better future for Africa. Now, to take you back, the genesis of coups, if you start now discussing the coup of Guinea Conakry or the Sudan one, you may be touching the symptoms, or you may be touching the tail end of it. But to take you back, here is the scenario. The founding fathers across Africa sit down, theorize, come up with the concepts, mobilize their people, secure independence. And as they secure independence, they give priority that we have to fight poverty, ignorance, and disease. And at the same time, move the continent to another level. What they did within the first 5 years of their respective independence, most of our colonial governments had never achieved it. So a grand conspiracy now was hatched. How do we arrest this Africa rising so fast? External forces now combined with the people in English we call quislings. These are citizens who are ready to conspire with outsiders, and they turn the tables. You realize that throughout the 60s, the UPC government and other progressive governments on the continent of Africa survived a number of coups, or were claimed by a number of coups. So this phenomena was there, and it was just a counterweight to the progress we are making. Unfortunately, the first victim of it was in West Africa, Olympia, the president of Togo, who was shot. Then the next, it was worked on to take off Osajefo Kwame Nkrumah at the same time with our leader here, Dr. Milton Obote. That was in February 1966. Dr. Milton Obote survived it by a whisker, but Nkrumah did not survive it. But since Nkrumah had started educating a number of Africa who our enemy is and how we should combine to handle the enemy, his brother, where we are discussing now, of Guinea Conakry, that is Sekou, declared him a co-president and gave him refuge until his death. And he said, come here, you have been always advocating or trying to teach us to unite and take on our external enemies as we push forward. Yes, most people blame leaders that they are not steadfast. That's why Kuzi blow them off. But this game is more complicated than what meets the eye. And it is a game which is planned that such and such a progressive leader with his political party should be contained, should be squeezed, should be eclipsed. That's why you don't hear anything much about conventional people's party in Ghana. And you don't hear much of Nkrumah. Nkrumah was the centerpiece, was the moving spirit. The moment was removed, the Uganda government went in total defiance and started singing Nkrumah's songs and warning the world that you cannot tamper with the moving spirit in Africa and you get away with it. It was a terrible mistake they made. Of course, the coup leaders working in hand, in concert with the external interests, they give them the spectrum to present.
Well, thank you very much, Luanga, for that submission. Incidentally, we are really not getting you well, but we shall get back to you. And now in studio, we are joined by Varenzi Newton from the Pan-African Movement Uganda chapter. You're welcome.
Thank you. I'm honored to be on this show.
Yes, we are looking at, of course, coups and political unrest. We've just been discussing Sudan, which you're very, very conversant with. But let's look at Guinea-Bissau. Yes, and the attempted coup. And perhaps why are we seeing that we are having a number of coups within a very, very short time? We just had one in Chad after the death of the president. We also saw one in Guinea, Conakry, successful one. We're having another successful in Sudan, and we are now also, there was an attempted coup in Guinea-Bissau. So this trend is actually very, very worrying.
It's indeed worrisome, and unfortunately, if you analyze the situations at the moment, you'll see that it is nothing new, but I would call it a cycle. It's just like a clock ticking. We have peace, we get comfortable, we accumulate resources. After accumulating resources, we are now rich, and we have to fight who takes the big share, and boom, a new conflict, a coup, a stronger party takes over, we negotiate, we go into a series of making peace, peace is achieved, a resemblance of democracy, manipulated elections, a little bit of settlement, and we resume that way. Until, it is very simple, until the continent realizes meaningful and true unity. The African Union must grow into a serious unified body. That's when military coups, conflicts, wars will stop in the African continent. You see, even if Europe had not come up with a serious unifying body, or even the United States, by now countries will be up in arms. You see some of the countries which had insisted on staying alone. I'll give you an example of Russia and its neighboring states. You see, at one time they come along to claim a certain part, and the war breaks up. We've seen recently other eastern countries in Europe were still fighting for some land. The same will happen. Unfortunately, for Africa, being that we are also endowed with the much endowed resources which are causing a lot of competition in the world. As you may be aware that right now the competition is no longer between just France, Britain, the traditional colonial powers we knew before, but the competition has attracted new players, including India, small countries like South Korea. Of course, they are big economies. The likes of Indonesia. When you look into these countries' strategic plan.
You are leaving out China.
Yes, of course, China is now a superpower. I'm talking about these seemingly unknown powers with a lot of influence. When you look at countries like Indonesia, you'll be surprised. In their strategic plan, they are planning to move into ranks of like the top 5 big economies of the world. Where is Africa? What is our strategic plan? We've been...
Well, now, the issue here perhaps I want us to address and look at is that why is it that whenever there is a coup against a leader who had actually seemingly stabilized the country, these people who come on after ideally fail. to keep the stability, of course, like what is happening in Sudan. Because Sudan, from 1989, Bashir tried his best, save for what was happening in the southern part, the rebellion in the southern part. But you see, after he had the part ways with Turabi, it became easier for the comprehensive peace agreement in Naivasha that led to the sharing of power between SPLA and the Khartoum regime, subsequently leading to the secession of South Sudan. So you find that the rebellion notwithstanding, but he had actually tried to stabilize the country, that there was a regime, there was a government that was functioning. But after him, we ideally see no government stabilizing. This group comes, within a very short time, it has fallen. Another group like that.
You know, for military coups, ideally, such armies which are ideologically poor, their intention is not to lay a sustainable good governance system of a country. The so-called elections which they organize are simply meant to manipulate the time, to put a resemblance. Even Bashir, I think, knew this. He never really intended to pave way for a civilian-led governance system. And this is what you know, last time I was talking to someone and he's telling me how some army men look at civilians with a lot of sympathy. You know, looking at civilians as a weak group who cannot govern themselves, who cannot think for themselves, who cannot take care of themselves, that they are weak. And by having such a mentality, such a group cannot pave way for an inclusive leadership led constitutionally on peaceful grounds, on an empowered civilian, population. These armies cannot see that their role is to protect the constitution and the country interests at large, and enabling the civilian population to be the ones in charge of politics. So whatever they do, you are crediting them, crediting them for nothing. Bashir and all these other coups, they never meant anything for peace. So it's simply a matter of time, as usual, to wait and see what is going to befall us. And that's what is something which happened.
Well, it's a question of time to see exactly whether the coup plotters always have peace at the back of their mind, or it is about grabbing power for their own selfish needs. But now let's move to Eswatini, formerly Swaziland, where really we see a number of demonstrations and violent demonstrations actually targeting businesses, factories, companies owned by the royal family. And we find that of course the people there, especially led by the opposition, are calling for reforms in the system there, that instead of having an absolute monarch, they should have a constitutional monarch. They should have actually an elected prime minister, as opposed to the appointed prime minister. But also they are saying that a poor country as Eswatini, you find that the king there and the family are living large at the expense of the people. So what ought to be done? Yes, Ndogumtuta.
Yeah, but like we said before, even we look at what is happening in the Swaziland. He was raising an issue of very great importance. Sometimes when we have seen these coups happen, I think either the planners are ill-informed, or the information which they use for these coups is also misguided. Because you find people come together, take over, the army takes over, especially where we have army takeovers. We find the army taking over the country and then promising constitutional reforms. And in most cases, it has not worked. Reason being that you have been operating under the same system. So it becomes very difficult to use the same group to make reforms within the system that you have operated under. When you talk of people being arrested, of course we saw that in Sudan, that when finally the coup was successful, most of the prisoners, political prisoners, were released. But you also realize that it was the same people who were arresting these people and putting them in prison anyway. So they are the same people using the same commands that were involved in doing some of these bad things that people are talking about. And that made the system maybe very unpopular. And knowing that the government is unpopular, then the militaries took over power. But also when you look at the issue of Sudan, for example, you also realize that to a greater extent, you realize there comes a time when there is a bit of disconnect, even within the political systems. Because why should you take over power, then you cannot have control for the power? It means they develop cracks of many centers of power. And now, for example, in Sudan, what they're trying to do is to consolidate, to have that power, one power center. But also, I think there is a need to look at the orientation. When it comes to civilians and the military, I think there is a big problem. And a part of the democratization of Africa has been maybe because of copying from here, from there, and we're not looking at our own, how we used to manage our issues, how were our armies managed, how was the reporting mechanism, and how was the training. Now, you find that we have cases where armies are semi-political, and we have areas where armies are completely apolitical. Now, in Africa, I think you see most of the generals growing up into politicians. It means these ambitions begin when even as they are serving.
But not as they are serving, as they are training.
Exactly.
When we go to, as they are training, the ambition.
Yes, and the issue he talked about, the having sympathy for the civilians. So now you look at the civilian like now these ones, you know, the civilians are looked at as powerless,
as a helpless lot.
Exactly.
Yes, yes.
So, and whenever there is the rank, then there is authority. Now that is part of the problem. But also that the politicians have, to a great extent, taken that virtue and exploited it. We have had cases where, I think it happened in Zambia, where the army said, no, we are not going to do this.
We have a history of not intervening.
Exactly.
In the politics of
yes.
people. Yeah, but of course, that said, let's look at President George of Liberia when the coup was going on in Guinea-Conakry, and said, look here, we shouldn't blame the coup plotters, the masterminders of the coup, but also we should come out to criticize systems that change constitutions without the will of the people. For example, we've had it here in Uganda, but you said that every other time we change a constitution, it is backed by the will of the people. You've seen the members of parliament being facilitated to go and consult the people, and when they come back after the consultation, at times that's when. But you find in these countries, such a process is never done, and even the leadership perhaps thinks of changing a constitution without reading the mood on ground.
Yeah, but of course at one point like that I had suggested, I think before he comes in, we said that it would have been better for African Union to veto some of these constitutional amendments, changes. Especially
those that do not reflect the will of the people.
Yes.
Yes.
So that if you are going to change, because this same issue was echoed by this man of Guinea.
Conakry.
Yes, who said, if UN is saying we should not, African Union is now saying we should not have taken over power, where were they when the constitution was being amended?
When Conde
yes. So I think, in all fairness, there must be a way of African Union taking charge of issues in this to avoid these microorganisms, because if the problems are emanating from constitutional changes, then African Union should be able to veto, to supervise some of these changes, where you find the changes are going to have diverse effects on the population and the leadership in a country, on the democratic development process in the country. I think it could either advise or wait or cancel, so that some of these small problems can be avoided. But if that's not done, then we cover that under internal. These are our internal affairs. Now, those internal affairs, once they explode, is when we begin asking for support. But we can do that before it explodes, I'm sure.
Yes, getting back to Newton. Newton, let's go to Southern Africa, because in Southern Africa, that is in Eswatini, in King Mswati's area, people are calling for constitutional reforms, governance reforms, and so much that really the demonstrations in the major cities in Eswatini have actually paralyzed the operations of smooth running of government and operations, business operations. So what is your take? What ought to be done? And we've seen the SADC leaders coming in, but is that going to help?
I think the situation in Eswatini calling for reforms is long overdue, and I think the kingdom is a bit downplaying the demands of the people. Even for the case of, for instance, Uganda, even before independence, it had moved a long way from that kind of absolute monarchy where you just wake up one day, appoint, and you know how kingdoms are. The royal class is always living lavishly, exploiting the common people, and with this ongoing empowerment of the masses, now with the social media and all that, everyone is watching information. Countries, many regimes have been taken over, including Sudan, we are debating today. So to be there and keep a blind eye, I think the kingdom is not paying much attention. I support the people for what they are demanding for. The only challenge is how the approach which they are using, because at the end of the day we may see if the change is not well managed and organized, even the people coming in, I don't think they will be prepared to take over an already dilapidated system. So I think by the coming in of the SADC, it should really put much energy in the dialogue process, not to just appease, make promises, but force the leadership of the kingdom to abide by the demands so that we can reach a compromise. I'm not one person who supports popular uprisings, because when people come in without being prepared, that is not a democratic dispensation we are looking for in this modern age. We need to act like really civilized people, to talk about matters, to debate about matters, to make proper plans. If it is about amending the constitution, let it be given ample time and resources so that they transit from this absolute monarchy into a constitutional monarchy, well planned and fit to serve the interests of the people and the interests of Africa.
Yes,
also,
yes.
Sorry about that. The challenge why we are actually facing all these poor governance systems, dictatorships and coups and all that, it is because we have failed to make our bodies strong to be able to buy it. Because today if you call upon African Union, apart from making a statement that we are no longer recognizing you as a government, we are suspending you, nothing much they can do. And indeed, you cannot say we are moving in forces, no. This country is probably not depending on you, actually you depend on them. And to make matters worse, most of these countries are not even meeting their dues. And to make matters more worse, if it is correct anyway, the African Union at a certain level operates under the European Union. So if the European Union now, the funder of African Union, which people don't want to say or talk about, has not sanctioned anything tangible, the European Union doesn't want to get into matters of political affairs. You see, even here in the East African community, these international partners are more interested in funding issues of trade and investments. When it comes to political...
Yeah, but also the trade and investment is dependent on a stable political environment.
Yeah, it is, but I'm talking about real politics in, like, let us formulate instruments which will abide these countries into, like, militaries are supposed to do this. You are not supposed to have this kind of change maybe in the constitutions. Let us maintain some standards. They don't want to get involved, the external partners. So until the regions themselves decides to walk the talk and say, look, if we are to maintain peace and stability in this region, let us come up with a system, a tool in our politics as a region.
Well, I must thank you very much. Maybe I'll back to Mtuta in 5 minutes.
What needs to be looked at, I think, like the guy Nani was saying.
Before Mtuta, you can come in. We are going in for a short break and we shall come back shortly. Don't go away. Keep it at UBC TV.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Welcome to the home of our stars. Come on in. We have our movie. Reality.
Okay.
Conflict. Comedy. Basirebu baffe bonna live right here. Because no matter where you go, this is the home of our stars.
This year, as Power Magic Mix 3, we are delighted to invite you to see, experience, and celebrate with us. Power Magic, the home of our stars. Multi-Choice Uganda is regulated by the Uganda Communications Commission.
Grow together with one of Uganda's largest companies. Apply for MTN shares for as low as 100,000 Uganda shillings. And when you apply using MTN Mobile Money, you get 10 free extra shares for every 100 shares you apply for. Dial *165*65# or use the MyMTN app to apply now. The terms and conditions of the offer and other important information are set out in the prospectus. For assistance, visit any MTN service center or Stanbic Bank branch countrywide or a licensed broker.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Welcome back from that short break. Mandakola Mzima is my name, and this is the Pan-African Friday, where we look at coups and political unrest on the continent, focusing on Sudan, Guinea, Bissau, and Eswatini, that is in the southern part of the continent. Yes, with me is Mtuta James and Ndugu Newton Varenzi, but we also have Ndugu Christopher Luanga on Zoom. Incidentally, the line is not clear, but we hope that perhaps he has shifted to a place where the internet is better and he can ably communicate. Yes, by the time we went in for a break, we were looking at Eswatini, and how the regional blocs can help in ensuring that such kind of unrest is actually resolved?
I think there's a lot of copying and pasting and some of the things, but I believe that a monarch still can be accommodated in this common in this modern era. But like you said, that most of the monarchs are known for extravagance, and but I think even where we have elected leaders who have also seen this. We remember when they used to say that Mugabe could fly, the wife particularly,
Grace.
Yes, could fly a Gulf Stream to Singapore for a weekend and to go and do shopping for shoes and the necklaces. So at the end of it, it's not about the what you are looking at, but what needs to be done. Now, Mswati has been a king after his grandfathers and the rest, and I think the people of that area had gotten used to it. But I'm looking at what is happening in the rest of South Africa as affecting, because I think it is now high-handed politics in that area. Now, and when you see the looting, and it's not any different from what happened in South Africa when people, so like they say in Uganda, people are just tired. Now, what is tiring them? There are many reasons. Not that they don't want the Mswati as a king, or that Mswati is eating a lot from the state, but I think there is that feeling of being excluded.
Okay, there is a feeling of being excluded because, one, they do not participate in the formation of government, the people. And secondly, the king is living lavishly. 15 wives with 15, more than 15 palaces at the expense of the people who are poor. And to make matters worse, of course, you look at COVID has also affected their economy as it has affected the economy.
But is it Mswati who is only having many wives in that part of the area?
Official wives, not.
I know there are even others. Yes, but I have seen this. We have a constitutional monarchs in some other parts of the world, but you also find that there's a lot of money that go into those facilities. So I think it's a matter of understanding of the respect that people have for themselves. Trust me, today is going to be Mswati, and they may change the system from Mswati to an executive prime minister, but the problems that have started are not going to stop. Trust me on that, because it is people who are being alienated, and they are spending a lot of their hard-earned money on a person who is lavish. Fine. Tomorrow you'll have an executive or prime minister, but the same now politics will be at play. Where that prime minister comes from, which political party he comes from, and we shall see now this power play even more strong. But for me, like what he said, at the end of it is trust. There's no way you are going to please people. That now people are happy, wherever you are passing, they are shouting your name. Fine. It is going to be there, but it's going to be short-lived. Because the same things that they are demanding from someone, they'll demand them from you. But the most important thing is to make our institutions work as Africa.
Well, not all institutions are working, but let's look at leaders. Why is it that at times they find it hard to embrace reforms? Because for the last 1 or so decades, there has been a call for reforms in not only the governing system in Eswatini, but also the culture, especially given that we have AIDS and other associated illnesses with us, that there should be a change where instead of the king that every year should take on a new wife. Those are some of the cultural practices, just like we had the female genital mutilation that has actually been opposed in Uganda. It has been opposed in Ethiopia. It has been opposed in Kenya. It has been opposed in Somalia.
I know he will say something on that, but before he does so, for me, issues of culture, I don't think we need to do a lot of debating whether this culture is good or this culture is bad. But still, we go back to how it is defined by the community that practice it. As we speak today, in Uganda, we're still struggling with the ending of genital mutilation in Kapchorwa. It is anticipated that by now, it would have ended. I know all efforts are geared towards that because of what we know it is bad, blah, blah, blah. But what about those who are practicing it? No, it has to be a mindset, and it has to take time. You cannot just wake up and say, we're stopping it today. If Mswati is having all these women every other year, it is because of the set of the culture in that particular part of the area, that when you are a king, this is what happens. We had a very big controversy here when the Kabaka of Buganda, I think, was being inaugurated. You know, there was that culture of saying, before you do that, you have to go with a virgin. Now, that is a cultural setup. But over time, some of the things are changing.
They are dying out.
Yes. Now, we know there is AIDS, and part of South Africa is one of the areas where AIDS has been a problem. But Mswati, I'm sure, is still living today without AIDS. So we need to have time for people to understand, and then they can negate what they are doing today so that tomorrow they are not doing it. But if one walks in and said, we are going to stop it today, trust me, Mswati is a beneficiary, but there will be others who will say, no, this is who we are, and this is what defines us.
Well, I think I'm told that Luanga is now online, and the line, I think, this time around is where internet is clear. Luanga, can you hear us? Oh, so we are looking at, we are now in the southern part of the continent in Eswatini, and looking at the demonstrations, the political unrest, and how best it can be ended. The internet is poor. I don't know whether also what is happening in Khartoum
has come to Uganda.
But I'm also told that in South Africa they are now under load shedding. That also their internet is also not as clear as it has been. Yes, Newton.
About the issue of culture, right? Just as the comrade has mentioned, before we jump on the board to change the leadership, I understand there is something to do with everything African people tend to shower them down. Do you know that at one point Europeans never recognized our marriages as legal? They were simply saying that this is just a trading issue, that you go, you buy a woman.
Because of the dowry.
Yes, you just buy a woman and take home. And indeed, sometimes when you look into the whole affair, the negotiations, the items we give, and someone takes a woman and you are free to buy another woman. But still you ask, how are people looking at this? Do they see any good in it? If it has not caused any trouble,
or harm,
then leave it, or harm. Unless if a culture like FGM, because of the damage it causes on the woman, that one you can advocate. And just as he has said that, which approach do you take? So you need to find a way of, because you know these reforms, just like the former emperor, the last emperor of Ethiopia, Haile Selassie. For him, he was a very learned person. He introduced reforms, and again reforms resulted into his downfall.
yeah.
So, as you know, leadership is very funny. Now, for Mswati, I don't think the real issue is about the women, like he said, as lavishness. Some people also just want to be in charge of the country.
Exactly.
And that's what now they are trying to push. Of course, benefiting from the need for reforms indeed. Yeah, the reforms, because times have changed, there is need for reforms. But the approach of staging such protests, I hate any group which uses young people to achieve its goals. Young people have been used even in South Sudan. Today they are still suffering. So I wish young people learn this and stay out of these funny campaigns.
Yeah, of course, we can also say that the leadership in every country should also take care of the young people's interests. Because ideally, once they are there as a redundant lot, as the Bible says, an idle mind is the devil's workshop.
You know,
so once people are idle, it is easier to manipulate them. But once they are busy with, once they are busy trying to make ends meet, I believe very few of them can easily be actually persuaded.
There is a challenge we are having now across the world. People no longer respect leaders. It has come to that level that everyone sees himself or herself as competent enough to be in that particular position. That's why now if a leader talks, we will come and dissect whatever he or she has said, and we come up with our strong points, and sometimes we trash what the leader has given as directives, forgetting that a leader has got a system, an infrastructure which informs him or her in whichever direction we have to take. For us, because of that mindset of now thinking that we are also there, we have acquired enough wisdom and knowledge, we begin to say now we need these reforms, we demand for this, forgetting even what lies ahead of us. Still, we can still refer to the Sudan issue, because as people were demanding for reforms, they forgot where the new Sudan was now. The new Sudan didn't have the oil which it had before. The new Sudan was under a kind of situation it would not trade very well. A new Sudan was entangled into regional politics too much, and it could not settle within that limited period of time to achieve all of those necessary reforms and changes which were required. And now that's why we see all this happening. So I think as the gallant citizens of this continent, even Uganda, we should at least try to embrace, we should take respect as a very serious and important issue.
Especially among the young people.
Yes.
Back to Mututa, let's look at these regional blocks, and we can say for now that SADC has at least been effective in trying to end or resolve political disputes in that part of the continent. For example, what was happening in South Africa, you remember the Zuma demonstrations, we saw SADC coming on. The elections in Zambia, when people were like, Lungu is the hesitant to concede, we saw SADC coming in. The situation in Mozambique, we've seen SADC. So we can ideally say, so far so good, we have, and even in Eswatini, we are seeing their role. And so much that even the king has accepted to call for national dialogue, so that they can chart the way forward with the common wananchi.
Yeah, that is very important, because then to create sanity, but also, like you said, the respect. Now, we are having issues of respect in one way or the other. When you have the opposition that does not respect the government in power, and I think last week we were discussing on education, and we had a very, which I liked, presentation, a good presentation from Dr. Mehed of from
Mauritius.
From Mauritius,
Yes, yes.
who was talking what the government of Mauritius has done, and yet he is in the opposition. But also sometimes the opposition hard stance is as the result of how governments in Africa also treat them, because you'll find the opposition telling you these people rigged themselves onto power, and then but you know, at one point you have to have a government. You are lucky to have a government. Now, when someone is in power, because tomorrow you're also aspiring to be in the same position, and you definitely will need to have that respect, that legitimacy, and that people will have to subscribe to your leadership. But SADC has done it very well so far, but also how I wish that the African Union can copy from there. Now, he talked of the European Union. Now, I think there's a bit of difference between the African Union, much as the benchmark, the African Union was benchmarked on the European Union. But there were some variants, some things that not necessarily look the same. Because when you look at the European Union, that you don't need to be one of the leaders in the states, in the subscribing states, to be the leader at the helm of the European Union. And I think it could also be something that the Africans need to do, that you don't have to be like now the current chairman of the African Union is President Tshisekedi from the Congo. Now, for me, I think we needed someone, and we have definitely have the executive wing where we have the commissioners and whatever, but we needed someone to be to hold a stronger office than that. And in which case, for me, I would have preferred to have a person who is not part of the sitting presidents on the continent.
Yeah, but we have the president of the African Union Commission.
Yes.
The chair, and who actually plays the executive functions.
But who, again, the power play out there is also a problem. Now, who waits for who to decide what? And I think that's why we see some of this decision is taking longer to be arrived at. So that you have to wait for the heads of state to see it. Then you also have to have the minister of the council of ministers. Yes. So it's a good segmentation, but decisions at the apex, I think, need to be streamlined so that we can have a single voice as Africans, and that voice could be respected. Other than when a person says this, and last time we were saying, if we are having other people imposing sanctions on us in Africa, can't we also impose sanctions to some people,
to ourselves?
Exactly. Whether it means it is.
But we've seen sanctions work in West Africa. You remember the Gambia? Yes, there were sanctions on Yahya Jammeh, who had actually refused to concede defeat and hand over power, and the sanctions pushed him really out of power.
Yeah, but we can also impose sanctions on the externals other than Africa, because some of the sanctions that are imposed on Africa, and that's why sometimes people have been saying this international court of justice, why should it only target Africans? Of course, we have seen the Milosevics and others who have also been taken there. Can't we also have our own court that can do some of the things, and we also be allowed to target some of the people who are creating crimes outside Africa?
Well,
but that discussion may not hold now. The most important thing is that as Africans, like he said, we need to put systems, and these systems that we can also respect, that when the leaders of Africa sit down to say, the elders of Africa say, let's move this way, we should be able to move, and we should be able to listen to one another. But the problem is, how do we now have us united under one front?
Well, we can see the ghost of coups again coming back to West Africa. You know, when it comes to coups, the region in Africa that has been severely hit by political coups is actually, unfortunately, West Africa, and the region that has not experienced coups, save for Zimbabwe, and that is Southern Africa. Yeah, where you find that actually the countries there have no history of coups, and I believe that is why every other time there's an election in that part of the continent, yes, much as there is violence, not to as large scale as it is in West Africa, or even we don't see the army so much interfering as it is in West Africa. Now, back to Newton, let's look at the Bashir, I will call it the Bashir ghost, because ideally the country is failing to get over Bashir, so much that it is also even rumored that actually he could be bouncing back as the head of state.
Right now, Sudan, you know, the late Dr. John Garang de Mabior, for him, he never supported the idea of splitting of
secession of South Sudan.
Call it split, because the splitting never ended. Other regions also want to secede.
Exactly.
So the situation right now is not as petty as people may view it, as a mere coup. It really indeed calls for a regional intervention, and an urgent one. You know, you can just imagine how Africa is, that a failed state, South Sudan, mediating into matters of Sudan, when itself
of Khartoum,
yes, of Khartoum, when itself is limping with wounds, having failed to realize most of the goals in its previous agreement. You know, so Sudan, I think IGAD is working out something, and the good thing, different from what is happening in Chad, these military leaders in Sudan, because for them they have more stake in the matters of the government. You know what I mean by more stake? During Bashir time, they accumulated a lot of wealth and influence in the economy of Sudan. So for them, they are no longer just guards of the state, but themselves are beneficiaries. That's why they are, even the tone seems to be a little bit different. That's why they are telling you, no, things were not going the way they were supposed to go. For us, we are here until the elections are being organized. It's like for them, the other syndrome that maybe the helpless civilians could not handle this. We are just coming in to help the situation. So I guess I want to give them a benefit of doubt and think that for them they might be more listening, and therefore they are open to dialogue. If indeed we stick to this, we can maybe reach a compromise and return the prime minister who was not elected, or guarantee that indeed they will respect the roadmap towards elections. I guess then you may maybe begin the process of doing away with coups. But remember, Sudan, for them it is military always. I don't know how this time around it will work out, but these two countries, Sudan and Egypt, the military, they believe that it is only the military to be in the affairs of the country. Any leader needs to be having a military background. And maybe politicians there should also know this, and they come through the military if that is the... You know, it's not a must that a leader must not have a military background. Because
and I think what you're raising is very true.
Even in the past, most of our kings were military leaders, even in Europe.
Yeah, no, I think what you're raising is actually very pertinent, that every country has its own situations, political situations, and those political situations will dictate and determine where leaders come from. But even in the African setting, leaders came from particular families, particular clans, and people were very, very comfortable with it. So if the situation warrants in Sudan and Egypt that whoever comes on must have a military background, I think so be it, because they have issues of the Nile that definitely somebody should be able to command the army in matters of protecting their interests when it comes to the Nile. But there are also countries where they've seen civilian rule throughout. That's why in Zimbabwe, even when the army overthrew Mugabe, they had to bring a civilian, that is Mnangagwa, and really, so that again they would dress it up as a civilian affair. So these are some of the things that we have seen. Now let's look at the regional blocks, because it's not about the coups, but it's a question of how can the regional blocks and the continental outfit, that is the African Union, come up with a mechanism of trying to avoid circumstances that warrant or that lead to political unrest and coups. Yes, James.
No, but I think so far, like I've said, we have seen SADC do a good job in that part of the continent. Now we have also seen a number of movements across the five actually sub zones of the continent. But it is also important, I think, to consolidate, like he talked about the systems, to build stronger systems as infrastructure towards the democratization of the whole continent, so that when there is a problem in one area, then the other area will be able to support. Why should France come and address issues of conflict, internal conflicts in West Africa?
Because we've created that vacuum.
Exactly. So Africa should have its own standby force. There is no harm having a base in South Africa, having a base in West Africa, having a base in East Africa, like that. I mean, we're having foreign countries with bases in Africa. No. Can't we also create our own bases, that when we have a conflict, and that's why the President Museveni was talking to Zuma when Libya was being attacked. So can't we also have our own force that can counter?
Why should we fall minus a fight?
Exactly. Yes. Why should you just disappear without a fact? But of course, like I told you, he was talking to a wrong man. Now, we need to have that kind of arrangement that Africa should be able to, before we get any other force from outside. Because when these people, we have been having UN in the Congo as long as that country has existed, but we are now learning of the atrocities that have been committed by the UN.
By UN, yes.
Within that same arrangement, can't we have our own people? Maybe if you have an African force to understand the African dynamics, the African systems. And you know, these guys, when they were brought in Congo, for example, the UN didn't come to protect the people of Congo, but it had other ulterior motives, and they have served those motives up to today. So I think to begin with, we need our own peacekeeping force of Africa that will be able to help
just
on the
just
African
like the one
continent.
we had in Somalia, the Amazon.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
These are Africans.
Yes.
Out there to stabilize a fellow African country.
Yeah, because if the Ugandan is keeping peace in Somalia or in Congo or in Sudan, they have that connection. And the way we look at our people is different from these strangers and foreigners coming and looking at the issues of we have seen recently, I think Britain compensated Kenya for the killings.
And Bunyoro is also...
Yes, for the raping.
Yes.
For all these things that they did to the Africans.
During the independence struggle.
Exactly. So, like I said, I think we need our own systems that will be able, and even the time is now that we need to look at these things. And part of the problem, like many people have said, is the disorganization of Africa that has allowed cracks for these external influences.
Well, Newton, of course, one of the reasons why we're saying unrest in Eswatini is that there is no democracy. And why is it that democracy keeps eluding most African countries? Because some will say that, look here, democracy is a foreign thing, but also corruption is a foreign thing. But I don't know why leaders find it easier to embrace corruption, which is a foreign thing. And when it comes to democracy, they keep dragging their feet.
The word itself, democracy, I think we tend to define it only in line with maybe the Americans. I cannot clearly allege that Eswatini is not democratic.
Exactly.
Because the most important thing is the government to be able to meet the interests of the people of that land. Now, where it fails, we must put into considerations what has led to the failing. At this moment, I am in support of the people who are demanding for reforms. But how we demand for the reforms is the issue, and how organized we are. We know that the entire continent has been suffering a lot because the systems, I don't want so much to go into that those discussions of the systems being developed by the international community to maintain Africa as a source of survival. You know, we'll be able to maintain, to grow a market and maintain it in terms of the market. Now it has expanded into health as well. We must be big consumers of the pharmaceutical industry in terms of medicines, drug and research. Now you see that some regions are persistently in that category of high prevalences of HIV, AIDS and all that. So it means more money is required in the Southern Africa to maintain that status quo. Why are people not curing? This is a deficiency, a disease of people behavior. We can eliminate HIV, AIDS in just 10 years if we consider. Okay, 10 years might be a bit short, because what we need to do is simple. People behavior, go test whenever you are going to have a relationship or an intimacy with someone. You find when you are positive, find ways of, I'm not here to teach about AIDS anyway, but it's not like corona where a virus will enter you without noticing or realizing. But how come the pandemic, the epidemic has persisted in our countries, most of our countries, especially the southern part?
So because some people attribute it to the culture.
Not really, because these cultures have been existing even before, but we managed to go through all these. And don't be deceived. even the cultures change and adapt. If these the cultural promoters get to understand that we can avoid this by doing that, they will abide. So that is also a mere lie. We have seen in most countries where the traditional cultural institutions are leading in promoting most of the government programs in terms of health. You've seen in Uganda here where all cultural leaders came out to call upon their people to abide with the SOPs and COVID, to go for vaccinations, even going as examples. So I don't think in that way it was bad. However, there is also a growing movement to make sure that most of the countries are destabilized. And this calls for Africa to review its own strategic future, not to be there to wait for others to just help. How can a small country, a small economy like Cuba, be able to develop its own vaccine, not one, not two, not three? Yes, it has been able, it has received support from China, Italy, and all that, but they have also tried to maintain their, to produce their own. And here we are, Africa, we are still cracking deals with the pharmaceutical powers to establish their regional, factories here. You remember, as when India produced AstraZeneca, the Europeans started to say that its efficacy was not enough. So how are we sure that the vaccines which are going to be produced in Rwanda or South Africa are not going to be fall under the same category?
And you know, that sounds strange because India is one of the biggest providers of health services in the world.
Yes.
They actually they
advanced.
have what we call health tourism. The people go there, they're making a lot of money out of people who go to India, not from only Africa but even other parts of the world, going to India for treatment.
But of course, like I was saying, the next episode, the next stage is set for people, a society or a group of people who will have medicines, will control the world. People who will have food will control the world. People who will have enough
even fresh water.
Yes, water will control the world. Now, unfortunately or fortunately, Africa seems to have the two.
Food and water.
Yes.
No, even the third one, because this medicine comes from our very herbs.
Yeah, because that's why your herbs were told to be satanic.
Yeah, okay.
So we like I said, Africa needs to come up with its own strategic plan on how do we move from here. And of course, the people in health will tell you the medicine made in Germany could be efficient, but if the same was made in Africa for the African disease, could be even as we speak today, there are certain medicines, local medicines that can treat certain diseases better than those that we get from outside there. But you can say when you do yours, it will be demonized. Say no, that one we have been hearing countries from Europe and America, they're saying that if you are vaccinated with some drug, then you'll not be allowed. You'll have to take another vaccination when you come here. Now, why are we having? Because, like you're saying, India has been supplying most of these countries with some of these medicines, and they are using them. Now, on this particular one, because there's a business connotation, one is saying, no, I should have that money. So the war of medicines, the war of vaccines, and then what? Now the disappointing part is, what is the CDC of Africa saying? Can't we, because we have seen these people who claim to be our friends, our supporters, our partners.
Our partners in development.
Exactly.
Or is it in development or in underdevelopment?
and you realize that some of the medicines that have been given to the people, especially in Africa, have come at a very high cost. you remember the South African case where a man put up a whole clinic to give free health services to women and children, but was injecting them with HIV/AIDS. We saw this in the Americas when they were injecting Africans with the syphilis. Now, how should Africa be sure that these vaccines and these medicines that we are getting are going to be safe without having our own checking systems? We sit and we think someone outside there has done it for us and we are safe to go. I think, like I saying, we also need to have a tofali on our own if we are to survive in the next phase, where the competition is going to lie on the food, is going to lie on the water, and it's going to lie on the medicines.
Yes, Newton, of course, we just have to get out of here, but we also need to get back to a long-lasting solution to the cause. Yes, the long-lasting solution to the cause. Of course, definitely, the solution is will and shall always be a political solution. So, what long-lasting solution do we give to to countries? Perhaps you would actually propose to countries like Sudan, countries like Guinea, both Bissau, Conakry, Chad. Actually, the countries that have been infected and affected by cause.
I think we just need a continental framework to be able to manage all sorts of conflicts within and the threats from outside. Because most of these are internal conflicts as a result of external interferences, which most of the times are invisible to the common man who will run on the street. He will not understand that some taxes are being put on a commodity. Will not understand that the oil prices are now down. So the African Union or leaders themselves in the bodies need to move faster and be strong on such pertinent matters. That is on the cause and the security situation in the continent. We know that there is always a cycle. It is a cycle, a mere cycle of peace, war, what? Whenever you are at peace, you prepare for. When you are at war, you prepare for peace, and it continues. Then on other matters of economy and issues to do with health, I think we also need strong leaders to come up strongly, define what they are standing for, and act accordingly. The speed at which we are moving is very, very slow. We need to move a little bit faster. You know, when you move a little bit faster, you achieve more. Then some people, of course, will say that the external aggression, interference will set in. How can we manage this? But there are countries which have managed to work out solutions, even when they have external aggressors. The only issue is which we don't want to go into. Most of us, we are cowards, because that kind of sovereignty comes at a cost.
Exactly.
You may not be able to be a minister being driven in a V8 Toyota Land Cruiser, because you may not have that much money to spend lavishly because of the priority key areas. So that's one thing our leaders cannot manage to go into, to be able to stand for. But so we have ended up having leaders, yes, they are being elected by people, but they fear to do what the people really want. And because they fear to do what people want, the external enemy, the enemy again, go through the people and remove this person when he stops serving what the interest of
Well, as we come to the end of this program, it is also very important to remind the viewer that on this date, that is in the 1880s, Bishop Huntington was actually killed in Busoga, in the present day Mayuge. So, and of course, making him one of the first, is it foreign matters and also religious matters in Uganda. Yes, your take on the life of Bishop Huntington and what that actually means to the development of Christianity and also of Uganda as a country?
His death was unfortunate. I was looking at the history, how he was handled. When you look at his diary, which he wrote himself actually, the last days before he was murdered. Of course, there was that confusion between Busoga and the Buganda, and that communication between the Mwanga
and Chief Luba.
And the Chief Luba of Busoga.
Actually, of Bunya.
Yeah, actually, of Bunya.
Yes.
Then that death resulted. But I sometimes sit down to wonder this type of bravery of a man who had moved all that to come for purposes of teaching Africans this foreign god. I don't believe that, like I said, if there was anything to do with God, I think we have lived closer to God than people who moved from London, from New York to come and tell us a God. We lived with Jesus here in Khartoum, I mean in Egypt. We were closer here. But anyway, for him it was unfortunate. I know it was a Christian expedition for him to come and teach people God, but it's also part of our African problems. Because some of these teachings have also proved to be part of the problems that we are having today. And his death was because of lack of an administrative clear system. Because if there was a problem with him, he could have been arrested if there was a problem anyway. And I know he could have been left. We had others who lived here, like Makai and others, also had issues with the kingdom, but they finally survived. But actually, for those people, when you hear the stories, they tell you his death could have also been as a result of those some of the Christians who are living already here, that give wrong information to the palace, in Uganda. But also, like we said, because I hear the Kabaka of Uganda, Kabaka Manga had said, let the man bamute.
These people are saying it was a miscommunication.
And then the person said, Vamwite. So whatever happened, maybe, because not a lot of it is not written.
Yeah, so.
But that happened, but he also gave a new chapter into the life of the Christianity in Africa. But was Bishop Hannington an ordained bishop?
Of course, that's what he's known as Bishop Hannington. So whether he had been ordained or not, yes, Lorenz Newton.
On the matter of bishop,
yes.
Matters of faith, you asked how could someone move from England to come and spread the good news. For matters of faith, it's very possible. We've seen people doing that, even as we speak now. They are moving in places, spreading this gospel, thinking that God will change. Yeah, so, but religion is part of the way we live today.
Yeah.
Because it trains you to hope for what you have not seen, and you be there comfortably, and they live happily, even when things are not going the way they should be going. I normally see people praying for Israel to be peaceful, to be flourishing, developing. Indeed it is. But Israelites are leading in cutting-edge technology. They actually develop most of the American technologies. The Jews, deal in all kinds of businesses.
Actually, the biggest
the dubious businesses, arms sales, diamonds, gold, even marijuana. They are leading as we pray for them. A born-again Christian person of Uganda will tell you marijuana is very bad, don't touch it, don't go near it. And the person they are praying for, the Jew, is planting marijuana to exploit the market first, to produce medicine out of it and get money.
Professor Pierre Lumumba has already said that when we are praying, we pray that the God of Israel protects our country, protects us. Whereas in Israel, they are using the latest technology to protect themselves.
and the lobbying.
Yes.
And acquiring money and resources and all that. So I think as the lessons from the death of I think actually is regarded as the first Christian martyr in Uganda, should teach us one thing. As we grow steadfastly in faith, which is not bad, but we should also be wise to know that faith teaches us to be strong, to prepare against all circumstances, including aggressions of all kinds of nature, including diseases. So as we remain faithful, we must go into research. We must fund research and develop edge-cutting technologies also. Let us emulate Israel, no problem. As you want God to protect Israel, also pray that God of Israel gives you the wisdom and the courage to develop technologies and defend yourselves like Israel. Today, if Africa, a small country somewhere in Asia or Europe can defeat armies of Africa within days. We saw what Israel did to Egypt and the guys in the Arabian, Arabian world when they tried to invade it. It came, sterilized everything. So as we grow into this faith, we need to reconsider so much.
Well, I must thank you very much, Newton Barenzi and Ndugu Mtuta James, for really participating on this show, the Pan-African Friday. We've been looking at coups and political unrest in Africa. The solution to Africa's political problems is actually with us. We don't have to look elsewhere, and the more we dance to the tunes of the foreign powers, the more we destroy our own continent. Manda Kola Mzima is my name, saying bye-bye.
From UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Welcome to the home of our stars. Come on in. We have our movies, gossip, reality, conflict, tulinane comedy. Basirebu bafebona, live right here. Because no matter where you go, this is the home of our stars.
This year, as Power Magic Mix 3,